Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. The next person we're having come in with us into this stream is Paul Jones. Paul is based with the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries in Emerald, although he has worked in other parts of the state, including in Charleville at the former pastoral laboratory. He's made a career studying pastures and grazing management for at least the last decade, and so he's come to share with us some of his experience and observations. Welcome, Paul Jones.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, Paul Jones. Going to report on some research we've been doing on spelling strategies for recovery of poor land condition across Northern Australia. The aim of this work is to better understand the different spelling regimes, the impact of timing of spelling, the duration of spelling, frequency, and come up with some better recommendations. So we're looking at the plant level, we're doing some charting, following some life cycles through under different spelling regimes. Now the issue we're dealing with is fairly well depicted in that slide on the left in central Queensland. It's fairly indicative of poor land condition, often on hard setting soils, low fertile soils, duplex soils, and there's a pretty reduction in the density of palatable and perennial grasses. They're typically desert bluegrass, Porphyria whiteana, and an increase in bare areas and also shorter lived perennials, wiregrasses and panics and annuals. Has a significant impact on productivity across Northern Australia. And also the sustainability as well. What we class as sea land condition is possible to recover that because there is still some perennial grasses left there, particularly our 3P grasses there. So there is potential to recover it, and also through wet season spelling and grazing management because of the low fertility, the hard setting, the soils, the fragility of them. Often mechanical treatments, improved pastures are economically not viable or not practical on a lot of these soils. So it's a big issue across Northern Australia, and that slide there is pretty typical of sea land condition. We're doing this research at two sites in central Queensland. The first site is Site 1 just outside Claremont, and Site 2 is near Charters Towers within the Wombiana grazing trial. Both these sites are about 620 millimetres average annual rainfall. The summer dominant subtropical growing season and very reliant on the perennial grasses to be sustainable and profitable. Site 1. The design of that trial is to basically comparing spelling with continuous grazing. These plots are within a continuously grazed paddocks, and we fence off those small plots to implement the spelling treatments. We're looking at early wet season spell, which is the first 8 weeks of summer, typically starting from the break of season. We've had 50 mils of rain over 2 or 3 days, and the full wet season being from that start date for the next 5 or 6 months for the whole summer. Both of those, both the early wet and the full wet, are done on an annual and a biennial basis every second year. And the full wet season spelling treatments at Site 1 were also done on a series of individual years to have a look at the impacts of seasonal conditions. This is some of the rainfall conditions throughout the period of the trial. This is the trial period here at Site 1 from 2010 to 2016. This is a drought index, or the ratio for each month of the previous 12 months rainfall as a ratio of the long-term average rainfall. So the zero line is average rainfall, and if it gets up to 1, we've had double our annual rainfall in that 12-month period. So we had a couple of really good years to start the trial, but then from 2012, middle of it onwards, it was pretty severe drought. This trial was run at a moderate stocking rate, pretty close to long-term carrying capacity, fairly conservative, and numbers adjusted with seasonal conditions as well. Some of the results, one of the key parameters we measure is what we call basal cover, or the area of living material of perennial grasses at ground level. It's a very good measure of the health and vigour of the pasture and size of the root system. Obviously, the bigger that is, the better the land condition, the more vigorous and productive our perennial grasses. So this is total basal cover. It's basal cover of all the perennial grasses. And I'll just put up the 3 treatments here where there has been some significant differences. The crosses are the continuously grazed, the circles are the early wet season annual spell, and the triangles the full wet season annual spell. As you can see at these 2 recording dates, there was a significant difference, albeit small, with the full wet season annual spelling and the grazed treatments. That significant difference was not sustained through the dry years. I guess there's a trend there that the spelling treatments are slightly better ground cover, but nothing to slightly better basal cover, but nothing to improve land condition and productivity as yet. There's some encouraging results there, but the dry conditions have been the overriding result, overriding driving factor there. This is a design for Site 2, so there's actually 2 trials there. One's, again, starting with C land condition, one trial under a moderate stocking rate, and the other trial C land condition under the high stocking rate. Again, compared with continuously grazed as much as they can be. Again, the full wet season and the early wet season annual spelling, as well as those treatments done on a biennial basis. Some of the results from that. This is the rainfall conditions for that trial again, and the drought index, and this is where the trial has run. Some good conditions leading up to the trial, some high pasture yields, and a good year for the first year of the trial, and then it's been a very severe drought since then, especially this 2014 to 16 period when we had a lot of deaths of perennial grasses. So some 9 out of 10 years of the drought has been, of the trial has been pretty severe, well below average rainfall conditions. The moderate stocking rate trial, this is the basal cover of the perennial grasses. As you can see, the dry conditions have reduced that perennial basal cover. There has been a small impact of full wet season spelling, a significant difference in that year, but again, nothing to write home about. There appears to be a trend there, but not a significant difference and not sustained throughout those dry conditions. So the seasonal conditions have been the overriding factor driving basal cover here in the moderate stocking rate trial. The high stocking rate trial, the seasonal conditions have been more severe on the impact of the seasonal conditions has been a lot more severe in driving that basal cover down. While there has been some significant differences with full wet season annual spelling in 3 of those recording dates, again they weren't sustained, and the recovery hasn't. The drop off in basal cover happened earlier. It happened more, and the recovery hasn't great. To show that this graph here is an average across the treatments. So one line for the moderate stocking rate, and one for the high stocking rate. And as you can see, the drought conditions as it started to reduce basal cover. It was pretty much 18 months earlier for the high stocking rate to get down to these low levels that the moderate stocking rate got to. Recovery has been quicker and is happening under the moderate stocking rate. It's probably not going to happen under the high stocking rate because the desert bluegrass is pretty much gone from it. The desert bluegrass, Bophriclara wardiana, is one of our key perennial grasses, and it holds the system together, and it's one of the keys we're looking for to drive recovery. Here's some data on the desert bluegrass under the moderate stocking rate and the high stocking rate trials, again, average across treatment. So when we set up the trial in 2011, those initial plants, there was only 42% of them surviving under the moderate stocking rate, whereas only 7% surviving under the high stocking rate. So it's pretty much all gone there. Similar levels for survival of the recruits. Basically, none of those desert bluegrass recruits surviving under high stocking rate. You can wind this, do some of these calculations backwards to look at the average time for original plants to die of that 2011 population. It comes up with 16 years for the moderate stocking rate and 10 years for the high stocking rate. Now, these figures have been calculated before, various authors in central Queensland, usually come up with 25 to 30 years for desert bluegrass. You can just see how the run of dry years has hurried that up, and particularly under the high stocking rate as well. But the desert blue actually, under the moderate stocking rate, has maintained its basal area because the bigger plants have survived and maintained basal cover. It hasn't done it under the high stocking rate. It's been mainly the smaller plants that have died, and we haven't had a lot of seedlings, and not many of them have survived. It hasn't been a high survival rate of them either. So some of the key messages coming out of this, desert blues are a long-lived grass. Recruitment rates are not high. They're episodic. You really got to look after what you've got. Heavy stocking amplifies the drought effects, increase the mortality of those, not just desert blue, but the other 3P grasses as well. We're looking forward to getting some good seasons and some recovery, but it's not going to happen under a high stocking rate, and it's going to take a while under a moderate stocking rate. And that land condition improvement we're looking for is going to take time, and you've got to have the right stocking rate and management of that stocking rates as well for that to happen and to support plant vigor. So it's got to be an adaptive management of stocking rates. You've got to know what your long-term carrying capacity is and manage adaptively around that as well. So with those very poor seasons, the numbers need to be lightened off, and with good seasons brought back in a risk-averse manner as well. All right, thank you. I'll conclude there.